Om Tava Kathamritam Tapta Jeevanam Kavibiriditam Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Srimadatatam Bhuvigrinantiye Burida Janaha. So we begin today's class. We will be discussing the conversation that took place in Sri Ramakrishna's absence. You may be surprised to know that the appendix of the first appendix which M has published records the conversations that took place at Baranagar Mutt, the monastery which was started after the passing away of Sri Ramakrishna, the first monastery. And it was in this monastery on Monday, 9th May 1887. Sri Ramakrishna passed away in August 1886. So, after a few months, the second day of the dark fortnight of Jyeshtha, Narendra and other devotees are in the monastery. So, since M found it necessary to include this portion of Baranagar Mutt, where the monks and some of the devotees who used to visit now and then had some very interesting conversations. So, we will discuss that today. So, the date is Monday, 9th May 1887, as I said. And Narendra and other devotees are there. Sharat, Baburam, these are the would-be monks. In future, they will be, they have already joined the monastery and staying there as monks. But now and then, occasionally, M and some others come to just visit and have holy company, because they believe that even if Sri Ramakrishna has taken Mahasamadhi, he is still living. Not only he is living, but uh, just a minute. Yeah. So Sri Ramakrishna, they believe that Sri Ramakrishna's presence is very much there in the monastery. And M was a regular visitor. So were some other devotees like Suren Mitra, who was paying the rent, in fact, of this small monastery, a dilapidated house. The rent was very cheap, and though it was a big house, because it was considered to be haunted and nobody wanted to buy that property, they thought it was ideal for the monastery and people would not frequent that place. So only devotees, so they somehow managed to clean it, the original monastery at Baranagar in Kolkata. So that is the place where they had their monastery in the beginning. Later on, they shifted to Alambazar Mutt and then finally to Nilambar Babu and Belur Mutt, the new campus. But before that, they were all staying there. The brothers of the Mutt are resting after the midday meal. Elder Gopal, who was also known as Swami Advaitananda later on, is copying some songs into a music notebook. So they perhaps did not have money to even buy a book on music. So some of the songs which Elder Gopal, that is Bodo Gopal, who was also later on known as Swami Advaitananda, was copying some songs in the music notebook. So this is what M saw when he came. He used to visit now and then. But a strange person comes. His name is Rabindra. He appears to be mentally upset or not in a normal frame of mind. When he enters the monastery, he was one of the devotees, a young devotee who was recently married. And he was quite young, Rabindra. He used to visit when Thakur was in Dakshineshwar and when Thakur was alive. Perhaps he was not married at that time. But unfortunately, his marriage was not very successful, and his wife practically made him. Uh, his state was very pitiable. He almost became mad after marriage. So it is afternoon, and Rabindra enters like a madman, barefoot and wearing only half a black bordered dhoti Black bordered dhoti was a sign of simplicity. People who have given up everything, they would normally wear these black bordered. People who are uh, fed up of life, or maybe, or not very much interested in worldly ways, they would normally wear that. So this was a type of vairagya, temporary vairagya, which Rabindra had on account of the behavior of his wife. So, and she was practically creating a big problem for him, as we shall read here. His eyes are rolling like a madman. They are all ask, what has happened? Because Rabindra was a good devotee till he got this. He was reduced to this state. He was quite okay. I mean, he was a very sweet type of devotee. But unfortunately, he has now come here like a madman. And then they all ask, they're surprised, how come Rabindra has become like this, with eyes rolling. Rabindra says, wait, I'll tell you everything in a little while, but I won't go back home. So he has come with a determination not to go home because he's mentally upset about something. I will stay here with you. So this is also sometimes known as a strange kind of vairagya, when uh, some bad things which happen to a person in life, they disillusion him, and then make him take up make him want to take up this monastic life. So he has come to the monastery with that hope, but surely he is not uh, fit for this kind of life, though he has come because of some temporary vairagya, some quarrel with his wife. So he says, but I won't go back home, I will stay here with you. And then he says, she is a traitor. She's a traitor. What do you think of this? I had a drinking habit for 5 years. Now he's telling his own story. Perhaps he's drunk now, and to forget his sorrow, and then he's blaming his wife now. He says, she's a traitor. I will stay here with you because she is a traitor. I don't want to go back to her. His wife, I mean, he has recently married. What do you think of this? I had a drinking habit for 5 years and I gave it up for her sake, as if he has done a great favor. He says, I even had this drinking habit, but 8 months ago, he says, that was 8 months ago, drop, not a drop of drink liquor I have taken, but still she has betrayed my trust. So she is not happy with something which he feels has happened. The brothers of the monastery, what will they do when such people come here? Actually, Holy Mother had prayed to Thakur that let there be a monastery, some place where all these monks who have renounced the world can stay together, so that householders like M, who was also one of the few who were suffering among the devotees because of a whimsical wife, a wife who was not normal. So also Rabindra has come. So it was Holy Mother's wish and prayer to Thakur that if you give them a small house, they can start a small monastery. All the monastic brothers, they can perform their sadhana for mukti. And whenever devotees or people who are in the world, they are faced with problems, some a lot of problems which are quite natural, and when they come with those problems, they will get some kind of solace. So he has walked all the way from Kolkata. So the brothers of the monastery try to calm him down and say, calm down please, how did you get here? Because they knew that Rabindra could not afford the carriage fare to come all the way from his home to the monastery. It was so difficult. Rabindra says, I walked barefoot all the way from Calcutta. So, he was so keen to come to the monastery. He was so upset with his wife and the problems at home. So, he feels that he was cheated, and he suddenly and comes to his brother, I mean, other Swami Shardanandji, and they were all there. Sharat, Narayan, and all were there. Even M was observing all this. He has noted it. So he says, I was so desperate to come here that I just walked barefoot all the way from Calcutta. Then the devotees ask, where is the other half of your dhoti? I mean, other half means, normally in Bengal, one half of the dhoti would be tied and the other half would be swung or uh, will be hanging on the shoulders. So that is how even Thakur used to dress. They used to use the other half of the dhoti, tie one half around the waist, and the other half would hang, I mean, be used as a cloth to cover the body. But he did not have, he just had half a piece of cloth, and he has just, like a madman, left his home, terrorized by his wife, and just come here. And he was shouting, she is a traitor, and all those things. And he has literally lost his mind. And then the devotees all ask, where is the other half of your dhoti? And Rabindra says something very funny and strange. She says, she tugged at it when I left and it got torn off. I mean, his wife was, I think, physically torturing him. So he had to leave behind one portion of the dhoti, and with whatever cloth he had, he just managed to escape his home, and just managed to come here. So this shocks the devotees who are there, because they could not believe that somebody could treat her husband like this. So anyway, the devotees say, please take a bath in the Ganges and cool off. Then we'll talk. They know now he is in a very, very agitated state of mind, having been thrown or pushed out of the house by a wife whom he calls a traitor, for whom he has sacrificed. He says he has tried to become good and given up drinks. 8 months he has not drunk, as if that is a great achievement. But anyway, he is convinced himself that I was right, and somehow I am being cheated by my wife. So somehow he comes, and as a result, he wants to join the monastery forever as a permanent member. But the other brother disciples, they know that this is not the condition. He is mentally disturbed now. Once he cools off, I think perhaps he'll go back home, go back to the world. So the now M is giving some background of Rabindra. He says Rabindra belongs to a very respectable Kayastha family of Calcutta. So not that he was just a vagabond or something like that. He belonged to a very respectable Kayastha family. He is between 20 and 22 years old. He is just young. He was married when he was very young. He met Sri Ramakrishna at the Kali temple in Dakshineshwar and received his special grace. Once he also spent 3 nights with Thakur. He is a man of very gentle and sweet nature. But unfortunately, he got caught in the world. So M is mentioning that Thakur had warned him. He is a man of gentle and sweet nature. Thakur showed him great affection, but warned him and said, it will take you some time. There is some desire left for sense enjoyments in you. So nothing is possible just now. Though he loved him, he knew that he is not fit to receive the grace. So then he gives the example. The police can't do anything the very moment a theft takes place. When it quiets down a little, the police come and arrest the guilty. So Thakur is giving an example. He says, now it's not the right time for you. Thakur had shown great affection. He knew that he has certain sense enjoyments left, desire for certain worldly enjoyments left. So he said, you finish those, or maybe it's not the right time. So he gives a very funny example. He says the police do not normally arrest a person when the theft has just taken place, unless they are, because they come much later and the thief has gone. So they have to make a careful study, and then the police come and arrest the guilty. What Thakur is trying to imply is that don't take a hasty decision, and you just play the waiting game. You are not yet free to leave the world. So then the second part of the conversation shows that Rabindra, apart from the problems he had at home, was infatuated with a prostitute. He had some bad habits like drinking, and maybe in that mood he would go there. So he had fallen down. I mean, in the sense, after the passing away of Thakur, perhaps, I don't know, he had taken to these, but he has all other virtues: compassion for poor, contemplation of God, and so on. But because of his certain weaknesses, he was infatuated, and learning that the woman was unfaithful to him, he arrives at the monastery in a torn dhoti and resolves not to return to the world. So he perhaps, out of feelings for this woman who was practically, he had perhaps married and was living with that woman, but he felt that she has she has become a traitor and given up on him. He again gets back his some kind of disillusionment with the world and the worldly things, and says, I don't have nothing to do with the world. So perhaps this hard lesson of life, sometimes hard lessons may be necessary to bring a kind of uh, dispassion for the world. So Ravindra goes to the Pramanik Ghat. He has somehow come here because he was basically, people knew that basically he is good, but he has taken one wrong step and now he is repenting for the same. So a devotee accompanies him, hopeful that the company of holy men will awaken the young man's spiritual consciousness. So some devotee has accompanied him, maybe to just see whether he is okay, and if he takes a bath, purifies himself and becomes normal and gives up his worldly inclinations, perhaps he can become spiritual. Because one of the great lessons Sri Ramakrishna taught was never to give up hope. Whatever be the condition, if the grace of God is there, one can get over all the problems of life. So after the bath, this devotee, perhaps it's the devotee is M himself. It may be M himself, because he had learned his lessons on Kamini Kanchan, which Thakur spoke of, uh, uh, how they uh, mesmerize a person and make him go away from the main goal of life. So M has perhaps understood what is his condition. He knows that basically he was a good man, but he has fallen into bad company, taken to drinking and other things. And he just wants to arouse his spiritual consciousness by uh, making him stay in the holy company of these, in the monastery with the monks and the devotees who have come. So after the bath, he deliberately takes Rabindra to the cremation ground near the ghat and shows him a dead body. There was a cremation ground very nearby, and the brothers of the monastery come here alone at night to meditate. It is good for us to meditate here. Here one clearly sees that the world is transitory. So M is trying to tell him, don't be bothered. You have committed some mistakes. Now don't be disillusioned with this. Just forget what has happened in the past. Take up to a new life. And now and then try to meditate here, because the fact that everybody is going to die one day, that comes when we go to the crematorium, when there is cremation ground and all those places, they kindle a kind of renunciation in us, vairagya in us, because we understand this life is temporary. The only way to know or to get a conviction that we should not be running after temporary things, like that woman uh, whom he wanted to marry perhaps, or had even married, and whom he was calling a traitor. So M perhaps thought, if I convince him not to go back, or not no, go back, but not to go back to the world and try to have some kind of dispassion for the world. He says, if one can clearly see in such places like the cremation ground that the world is transitory, then perhaps, he says, you can meditate better, or you can, the analysis into what is real and unreal, nitya nitya vastu viveka. Sri Ramakrishna used to always return again and again, say, one is nama japa, taking the name of the Lord, nitya nitya vastu viveka. Nitya, what is transitory, what is permanent, meditating and trying to discriminate between the two, and going after the permanent, eternal as far as one can, and giving up the temporary. So to encourage such distinction or encourage such discrimination in Rabindra, he perhaps he has not given his own name, but he says a devotee takes him there and convinces him for some time. Hearing this, Rabindra sits down to meditate, but cannot meditate for long, because he is now come in a very, very restless state of the mind. Having tried something in the world and having failed in that, he is restless, Though he knows that this is transitory, he should not be running after those things, but still his mind is restless. It takes some time for the restless mind to calm down. So then the devotee takes Rabindra to the monastery. They bow down to Thakur in the shrine. The devotee tells Rabindra that all the brothers meditate here. After showing him, after the bath and taking him to the cremation ground where bodies are burnt, where the transitoriness of the world is felt at least for some time, when the body is being burnt, we get a feeling for a few days at least that this life is not eternal, this body is not eternal. So Rabindra sits to meditate for a while but cannot continue for long. So even after that, his mind is restless, but after he comes to Thakur, um, he he is calm, his mind becomes a little calm, seeing the wonderful, he perhaps remembers his old contacts or old meetings with Sri Ramakrishna, who used to love him, though he had some problems. Sri Ramakrishna used to love him. So he tries, he succeeds for some time, but he cannot continue even here. Then money means this is M very clearly, used to sometimes write as money just to hide his identity. Money means Master Mahasaya. So money is asking, how do you feel? Is your mind very restless? Is that why you got up? You probably couldn't concentrate properly. So M is trying to help this Rabindra. He says, in the cremation ground, you could hardly sit. Your mind became restless. You came here also you could not sit. Is it because you can't concentrate properly? Is it because your mind is still restless? So then Rabindra gives him an answer. He knows that his mind is restless. He says, I am definitely not going back to the world, to my place. Even if my mind isn't settled down, even if my mind is restless here, I would I know for certain I've taken a decision, I'm not going back, because definitely I am fed up of the world. Mani and Rabindra stand in a quiet spot in the monastery. Mani then tells a story from the life of Buddha. So Mani is now trying to help this devotee, this young devotee, 20-year-old devotee, who has been disillusioned by by the behavior of the person whom he loved. So Mani tells a story from the life of Buddha. Buddha first attained spiritual awareness. Buddha, as all of us know, we should know the background. Buddha's father did not want him to even get any kind of feeling or any kind of vairagya. He was afraid that if I don't uh, keep him engaged with the worldly things, always surround him with joy and worldly things. His father thought, if I do that, then he will not get thoughts of vairagya. Though it is not the right way, but he thought, as long as possible, I will not show him the negative side of life. That is how everybody thinks. We can close our eyes to reality. We know reality is something not very joyful. If there is joy, there is sorrow also in its wake. So, most of, like all fathers and mothers who are very keen to uh, force their children into the world, they try to show the positive side of life. And because many of them are afraid that if they see the negative side, perhaps they will be discouraged. So Buddha was the prince, so naturally the king did not want him to have vairagya, because one fortune teller had told him, after say astrologer had told him that Buddha would become a great monk, and he did not want this to happen. So he was kept in lot of, uh, there were lot of care was taken to see that he never sees sorrow in his life. But how long can you prevent a person from seeing the sorrowful things of the world? So that was not possible. So Mani is trying to tell that story. And then Buddha was in this state of mind. He was always happy, always surrounded by a lot of joy, fun, and good food. And he also had a child, he had a wife, and all those things. But because he was not aware of the other side of life. But when he sees a dead body, a sick body, and an old man. And then he asked, is this also part of reality? He was so naive that he could not believe that there is so much sorrow. But when he went out with his charioteer, who took him and showed him what kind of world is there outside the palace, he says, what you see is not what is inside the palace. So after he saw these things, his mind was disturbed. He said, is there, I never knew. He was not deliberately not shown by his father the sorrow that exists in the world. So when he came back to the palace, he was in a he was deeply thinking about life and what is the purpose of life, and he was not able to enjoy uh, the things which he used to enjoy. And he was listening. He had his first spiritual awareness when he was just meditating, and he heard to some delightful songs of celestial maidens. Some maidens, some angels appeared to him in his vision, and they were singing some wonderful songs about spirituality, about what true spirituality is. These days, the lives of Buddha and Chaitanya are continually discussed in the monastery. So he is telling Rabindra to just to console him, because he wanted to console his restless mind. So Mani sings. Mani was a good singer. M was a very good singer. So I think this is a song which Girish wrote. Anyway, he wrote a beautiful song on Buddha and Chaitanya, Buddha's song, where Buddha hears in the drama, and in the biography also it is there. These celestial maidens, these angels came from somewhere and sang these songs, and that inspired Buddha, because those songs were full of vairagya and showed Buddha what is the path to peace, eternal peace and rest. The song was, we long for peace, but where can it be found? That's the English translation of the Bengali song. Where we long for peace, but where can it be found? Where we come from and where we go, we do not know. I mean, these angels are creating a state of mind in Buddha where he is shown, or where he is given a true understanding. He says, we don't know where did we come. No doubt we were born to our biological parents who will look after us. But where will we go after death? Where will our parents be with us? They will not be with us eternally. So we will be there, we will be going away. Everything is changing in this world. So Buddha says, we long for peace, but where can it be found? This was the song. Buddha doesn't say that. He is hearing this song, and that resulted in vairagya, in some kind of dispassion for the world. Though he was surrounded by joy and everything, one glance, one glimpse of the transient nature of the world he saw when he went out uh, to have a tour of his kingdom, and he saw an old man, a terribly old man who was hardly able to walk, tottering on his stick, holding his stick, and a sick man was lying down, and a dead man whom people were carrying to his funeral. So these three sights deeply disturbed him, and when he came home and when he was trying to meditate or just contemplate on these things, suddenly these celestial maidens, celestial angels come and sing this song. We long for peace, but where can it be found? Where we come from and where we go, we do not know. Again and again returning with laughter and tears without end. We wonder we wonder all the while where our paths will lead. So this created a deep sense of discrimination, vairagya and viveka in Buddha. So it was from here he got his first spiritual awareness. That's what they say. Even in the Bhagavad Gita, we have the Vishada Yoga, when Arjuna was totally confused and disillusioned with this war and the likely consequences of the war. It was then that Sri Ramakrishna thought that this is the right time to give him advice and show him what true spirituality is. So the spiritual awareness sometimes awakens in a person who is deeply troubled and disillusioned with the joys and sorrows of the world. So this song which Mani sings with the hope that this Rabindra, who has been disillusioned has considered, as was thrown out by his wife or maybe paramour. He was living with her, perhaps. We do not know. That is what M is guessing, that he was shouting that his wife is a traitor. So something seriously had happened, and he was trying to make any meaning. But because of his basic spiritual awareness which Sri Ramakrishna had awakened, he somehow came back, and M tries his best to tell him about Buddha so that he can regain his spiritual awareness and forget everything about the world. So he says the celestial maidens came, they sang this beautiful song, and that inspired Buddha to find out the true meaning of life and set out on a path for total freedom. So that gave him a sense of freedom, and he found that all the joys of the palace and the place where in his kingdom which he was given was such a wonderful house, a wonderful palace to live in, lot of wealth, lot of power, a wife and a small child, everything was there. But somehow his this song created a turbulence in his mind, and a little bit of spiritual awareness. The worldliness was slowly going away from Buddha because of his intrinsic spiritual nature. So also M thinks that if I quote this song, if I tell Rabindra, perhaps there would be a change in his attitude and he would develop that spiritual awareness. So we long for peace, but where can it be found? This is what Buddha heard, and that changed the whole perspective, his whole perspective towards life. Where we come from and where we go, we do not know. Again and again returning. Returning means being born again and again. Coming back to this cycle of birth and death. Sometimes we laugh, sometimes we have tears, and this does goes on and on and on. So how long we will do this? How long we will be in the samsara? We wonder all the while where our paths will lead. So Buddha was confused. He said, okay, I may be a king, I may be a prince now, I may be the king one day, but after all it is going to end. There will be laughter, there will be tears, some mishap might happen, and there may be tears, there may be ups and downs. But where am I? What is the exact purpose of life? So that was the question which brought about a spiritual awareness in the great Buddha, Siddhartha, who later on became Gautam Buddha. And M is trying to quote this incident because Buddha's life was being discussed in the monastery. After the passing away of Sri Ramakrishna, they all gathered here. They used to meditate on Sri Ramakrishna, their guru, and also read great texts like Buddha's life, Chaitanya's life, to keep up the spiritual flame alive. That night, Narendra, Tarak, and Harish returned from Calcutta, where they had been invited to eat at a devotee's house. When they arrived, they say, "Oh, what a feast we had." You see, these people had very little to eat. So the devotees knew that. So now and then they would invite some of the monastics, some of the devotees who had the means to. So they would cook some food, and Naren, Tarak, and Harish, who was at that time staying, Harish later left the order, but Naren and Tarak was Swami Shivananda, who later on became Shivananda. So they were more or less permanent members of the monastery in the beginning, and they had just gone to a devotee's house where they were sumptuously fed, because the devotees knew that they hardly got anything to eat with the little meager resources. They had to beg for food, to go to different households, beg for food, and then come and cook something and eat. So Narendra, the brothers of the monastery, M, Rabindra are all sitting in the room of the demons. Room of the demons means there was a room which was so dilapidated, and it was unfit for staying. So that's why it was known as the room of the demons. The monastic brothers called themselves demons of Shiva. That is another Danava. Danava means demons. So demons who uh, Shiva, as we discussed on Friday, on occasion of Shivratri, how and why Shiva is considered to be the king of monks, the king of yogis. So all his assistants, Nandi, Bringi, and all the demons, Danavas, they are all disciples of Shiva. Unlike Vishnu, who had good disciples, Shiva decided to compassionately or very shower his grace upon these uh, unfortunate people who were known as Danavas. So we always say the Danavas of Shiva, the demons of Shiva, that is commonly said. So they, since they were all monastics, they jokingly called themselves, they named themselves as Danava. So the room of the demons, Danavar Ghor, I mean that is the name they gave for the place where they normally sat and talked with the devotees and all. Narendra hears Rabindra's news, because Narendra also knew Rabindra because he used to come to Thakur. So he knows that my brother, a fellow disciple, though he was not a disciple, but he was very close to Thakur, he knows that he is suffering a lot in the world. So grief stricken man and Narendra's counsel. So Narendra is trying to give some kind of, because M has given whole background. M also tried to console this Rabindra, who has now become like mad, having got so much of, so many blows from his would be, I mean, wife or paramour or whatever it is. He was infatuated with her, and then he went after her, and then he got this experience. So Narendra sings now, just maybe to console him, as though to instruct Rabindra through a song. So the song is, "Give up, O man, and cast aside any wrong advice. You will be freed from your pain when you have known the Lord." So this is one song which Naren perhaps knew, the meaning of which was that don't follow the wrong advice of the worldly minded people who will encourage avidya maya and make you go after uh, these things. Uh, so avidya maya will take you away and give you wrong advice. There will be a lot of people who, inspired by avidya maya, will give you wrong advice. So he's telling, give up, O man, and cast aside any wrong advice. You will be freed from your pain. If you want to be free from this pain, he's addressing Rabindra and telling him indirectly that if you want to be free from the pain which you are suffering because of your own foolishness, or maybe because of the wrong advice you took from the wrong people and tried something which failed miserably in this world, and that forced you to come here. So Narendra sings again, as if advising Rabindra, aspiring soul, imbibe the bliss from Hari's cup of love and become intoxicated. He knew perhaps Rabindra was given to alcohol. He says, don't drink that. Try to, you are an aspiring soul. Try to imbibe the bliss, get the bliss from Hari's cup of love and become intoxicated. If at all you want to become intoxicated with the name of Hari, the love, the feeling of love you have for God. So we remember one incident when Girish Ghosh was also used to drink a lot. So when he first met Sri Ramakrishna, somebody told him that if you go to him, and he was so impressed by Sri Ramakrishna. First he thought, because he was himself drunk at that time, he thought when Sri Ramakrishna was in Samadhi, his eyes, if you even see the picture, many people think that he is in a very intoxicated state. But that intoxication is because of the deep spiritual visions one has, the deep love of God, Hari's love, cup of love. Drinking that cup of love, one becomes intoxicated. So, like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Mirabai, Radha, and all those great devotees of Hari, they all used to uh, have this kind of deep love which used to intoxicate their minds, and it appeared as if they have been drunk. So Girish Ghosh asked some devotees there, what has he drunk? He looks to be more intoxicated than me. I have tasted some of the best liquor in the world, and still I don't get drunk like him. So what has he taken? What kind of wine has he taken? So then Sri Ramakrishna later on joked. He said, I will give you a wine which will make you forget all the gross wines of the world. So now, knowing his background, Swami Vivekananda is trying to tell him, now you had enough of alcohol, now you stop it and imbibe the bliss from Hari's cup of love and then become intoxicated. So, he wants to be intoxicated, he wants to forget the world, but don't do it by drowning cups and cups of liquor. So, he says, uh, don't do that. You just, the next verse says, once childhood is spent in play and adulthood infatuated with woman. So, he says, the singer of this song, the one who has composed this song, that how long you will spend your life in vain. In childhood, we can understand you will be playing. Half of the whole childhood will be spent in a sporting, in play and study and play and all these things, trivial things. And adulthood, when you become an adult, when you think, or when you ignorantly think you have become mature, and you feel that you have grown from childhood, uh, this song says you become infatuated with woman, because he knew Rabindra, exactly the same thing happened to him, and he was trying to marry a person who finally decided to dump him. So she calls her a traitor and comes here. So he has understood now. Swamiji has understood that if I sing this song, perhaps some light, some Vidya Maya, the wrong advice which he was taking from worldly people, perhaps he will be free from that, and listening to some good advice and these good ideas from these wonderful songs would bring him back to normal. Then he says, in old age, one phrase falls prey to bodily ill. So it starts with childhood, shows how temporary this life is. You spend your whole childhood in play, you become adult, then you become infatuated with women, then that phase is over, and in old age you fall a prey to bodily ills, and then lies in bed from morning till dusk. So that is the last phase of your life. Are we be born to just do that? Spend our whole life in play, then run after women and gold, and then finally fall sick, and maybe just be dumped by somebody, and then fall sick in old age, which is a natural thing which happens to everybody, and lie in bed from morning to dusk. How can this delusion be removed? As the musk deer roams the forest, not knowing that the sweet scented musk that draws it ever onward is lies in its own navel. It is there in its own navel. They say the musk, the beautiful smell of the musk deer, which the musk deer emanates, the deer emanates, is uh, stored in the navel. But the musk deer does not understand that, and seeing the fragrance and thinking it is coming from outside, it runs after that smell. But wherever it goes, it experiences the smell, but it doesn't realize that I don't have to go anywhere. Wherever I go and sit, so that is, I'll get the, because the smell is inside. So also, we try to see this divinity outside. We go here, go there. All it requires for a person to do is sit down at a place and try to find that fragrance within. Once you get that, once you find that, then you don't have to run here. And then he says, so without the guru, one's searches will be in vain. So without the guru means here one, without the right advice. You have been taking wrong advice from so many people and running here and there in the world like this musk deer. But all the while, like Rabindra, the divinity or the divine spiritual awareness is still there, but it is hidden, but it is still there. Ignorantly, people think they will get that spiritual awareness in woman, in gold, in all the other things. So the song says, in childhood, you think that joy will be found in the toys. So it will be spent in play. Then we find that maybe we want bigger toys. We think woman and gold and wealth and property and all those things will give us that joy. So the man runs after that. When he sees even that is temporary, then he becomes old. Then he wants to somehow get cured, and he hopes after their hope after hope. He tries to become healthy, fit again, but unfortunately, age catches up. So, how can you remove the delusion? So, Sri Krishna says, it is only when you get your guru. So, without the guru, one's searches, the aspirant searches will be in vain, because the guru will give you the right advice. supposed to give you the right advice, which will tell you things which are according to Vidya Maya, not Avidya Maya. So in the beginning, he began the song. Swamiji began the song by saying that don't cast aside all wrong advice. You will be freed when you have known the Lord. How to know the Lord? You go to a guru who will give you the path to the Lord, and then you can traverse that path, get rid of all the sorrow and pain by repeating the Lord's name, and then enjoy the ecstasy, eternal ecstasy of communion with the Lord. So after some time, after Swamiji sings this song for the sake of his unfortunate brother unfortunate friend who has been who has got a big blow and trying to go after the world. So after some time, the brothers of the mutt come into Kali Tapasvi's room. Kali Tapasvi was Swami Abhedananda. He was somehow not very keen to mix with the other monks like Naren. They were very compassionate. They felt that these people, after all, they were very close to Thakur. Now, by because of some mistake, they have entered the world, and or maybe made some mistakes in the world. But now they want peace and solace. So we should spend some time for these people. But Kali Tapasvi was of a different nature. He was so inclined to books and learning and doing tapasya, doing lot of meditation, that he wanted a separate room, and Swamiji very kindly gave him. Some of the brother disciples didn't like that idea because he never helped in anything. He was always confined to his room, did not meet anybody. He was of a peculiar, but Swami Vivekananda was very broad. He knew there will be people of different kinds. You should not force him to change his nature. He was happy with Kali Tapasvi's idea of living in solitude and intensely doing tapasya, doing meditation and reading books. He said if somebody wants to do that, there was a quarrel sometimes when some of the brother disciples in Baranagar said that they after eating, after there are so many vessels, can we not share and clean them? They were all angry on Kali Tapasvi because the moment he finished his food, he would simply go to his room and start his japa. He did not want to waste time. And Swamiji knew he was genuine. So Swamiji knew that this jealousy is not good. So he told his brother disciples, you from tomorrow, none of you have to wash the vessels. I will do everything, but don't disturb him. Let him do what he wants. Such was the wonderful love of Swami Vivekananda. He believed that everybody should be allowed to follow his or her own nature. That is what Swamiji believed. That everybody, each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest that divinity which is already there within. You don't have to, even within Rabindra it is there. But unfortunately, like the musk deer, he doesn't see that beautiful smell, the fragrance inside his own navel. He is going after worldly things and he thinks he will get pleasure there, pleasure here, pleasure with money, pleasure with a wife, and all those things. But when he sees that the musk is inside him, and if the inside is not satisfied, if that freedom is not there, then with that bound mind, he will always be sorrowful. So, Kali Tapasvi also believed that he felt that even talking to others, he rarely mixed with even his Guru Bhais. So, the moment he got some time, he used to do lot of meditation. And Swamiji knew what is wrong. So, Swamiji was so gracious and kind. He said, give from tomorrow, don't complain. You do whatever you like. If you can't clean the vessels, nobody asks you to do. I will do it. I will do all the vessels myself. But I will not uh, change his routine. He is very so well set. That was the magnanimity of Swami Vivekananda. He treated all his Guru Bhais equally. He knew they had different natures. Some people like to read. So you can't expect everybody to follow Karma Yoga. Some of them loved Raj Yoga more, meditation, books. Some people who wanted to serve, like Shashi Maharaj, used to do puja. He was full of bhakti and he did the service of his brother disciples by cooking for them. So it was all voluntary. Everybody had to follow his own nature, what he feels is right. And that doing that unselfishly will take one to God. That was Swamiji's idea, that whether it is Kali Tapasvi. So this is Kali Tapasvi's room. Kali means his name was Kali Prasad. He was Swami Abhedananda later on. So he was allowed by Swamiji to uh, extensively lead a life of meditation and reading. Girish has just sent two of his new books to them, Buddha Charitra and Chaitanya Charitra. From that only, I think these songs were sung. And M also used to participate in the reading. So, along with the monks, there was a time when the visitors could come, M would come. They used to bring some food, if sometimes, if it was possible, donate some money, do whatever they could to help the monastery. And at the same time, enjoy the holy company, because M missed the holy company of Thakur after his passing away. And then he saw the living Thakur in the monastery. He used to come and quietly sit and read, enjoy the reading of the books. So Narendra Shashi, that is Swami Ramakrishnananji, who continued the puja after he got the relics of Sri Ramakrishna, Atmaramir Kota, he continuously worshipped it. He never went anywhere. Puja was his only passion. He used to serve Thakur, cook for him, offer the prasad, and only that prasad he used to share with the brother disciples. So that was his joy. Just as Kali Tapasvi wanted to lead a life of solitude, Shashi Maharaj also was 24 hours of his day, he was engaged in the service of Thakur, because he never believed for a single moment that Thakur had gone away. For him, Thakur was still a living force for everybody, but especially Sri Ramakrishna, Sri Ramakrishnananda believed that Sri Ramakrishna is still there, and he did his seva as if he was still alive. And with that spirit, he did. So, Shashi, since Narendra, Shashi, Rakhal, Prasanna, M, and some other devotees are present. Some of them are monks. Rakhal is Swami Brahmananda. Since coming to the new monastery Baranagar, Shashi has devoted himself heart and soul to worshipping Thakur. They are all amazed at his devotion. In the same way that he served Thakur day and night during his illness, he now worships him single mindedly with deep devotion. So, that is one way of uh, serving Thakur. So, for him, Thakur was still alive. Might have left the body, but the urn, the Atmaramer Kota, which he had very carefully preserved, he did offering as if Thakur would come and eat, and he could literally see Thakur eating the prasad, and only after making it prasad he used to distribute that to all the brother monastics as prasad. So that is how he served. Sometimes he himself used to beg for rice, vegetables, and cook delicious dishes, spend his whole time in the shrine. So that is his uniqueness, like Kali's Swami Abhedananda's uniqueness. Then we'll conclude now. One brother of the monastery reads from the Buddha Charitra and Chaitanya Charita. He reads Chaitanya Charita somewhat sarcastically. Narendra snatches that book away from him and says, "You spoil a good thing doing that." Narendra himself reads about Chaitanya Deva's showering of love. Perhaps that person, that brother monastic, perhaps he appreciated Buddha more, or maybe he didn't like the path of Chaitanya. So he was reading in a very casual tone, sarcastic tone. So Swamiji did not like that. If you don't have faith and you don't have devotion to the small job of reading, then you should not read. So he pulled the book away from him, started himself discussing about Chaitanya's Deva's showering of love. A brother of the mud says, "I say that nobody can give love to another." Now, this is some people, they had some wrong ideas, the brother disciples. So he is a brother, and perhaps he had got blows from everybody in life. So such people sometimes become negative. They feel we don't have anybody, there's nobody in this. Because when they are cheated, when they understand that love has become a barter, the parents feel that the children love them because they expect something. The parents feel, the children also feel that the parents love them because expect them to look after them. So there is no pure love, no unconditional love. So that is seeing that is the condition. Perhaps one of them was Yogananda, because he married just because his mother was weeping, saying that if you don't marry, your sister will not get married. So you please marry for my sake. And this Yogananda, who just to please his mother, he thought his mother is loving him and his sister so much, for the sake, because of his love, the misplaced love, he married. And then when the mother finally, when he became disinterested in married life, he said, why did you marry if you did not want to enjoy that married life? Then he says, I married just because you told me. Then mother was upset. He said, who marries because somebody tells? Unless one has a intrinsic desire, why should you marry? So he was terribly shocked. Him whom he considered his life's love, because nobody loves anybody other than God, then one does one's own mother, one biological mother. And when he got a shock of his life, perhaps that made him lose all faith in love, human love. He says, a mother for whom I sacrificed my life and married, and now she says that it is because you wanted to marry her. So he felt, he immediately left and came to Thakur. And he knew that there is no sympathy or empathy in this world. Wherever you go, that's why that brother, maybe it is Yogananda or somebody else, is remarking, the name is not given here. He says, I say that nobody can give love to other. He was so, perhaps so much of vairagya was there. He said, absolutely, love and all these things are all humbug. It's just a business. We just love if some of our interests are served. So there is a beautiful verse in the Upanishad also. It is for one's own sake that the husband loves the wife, and the wife loves the husband, the father loves the son, and the son loves the father. In the Upanishad, it is beautifully described. There is there is hidden selfish interest in our love for, in the worldly love. I'm not talking of God's love, which is unconditional. The divine love, the love of a real guru towards his disciple, or the love of, that is Sri Ramakrishna's love to towards his disciple. So Narendra disagrees with him. He says, Paramahamsa gave love to me. Why do you say that? You can't say that anybody gave. I have received that. I know it for certain. So Paramahamsa gave love to me. But the brother is still doubtful. So he says, are you sure you got it? Are you sure you got it? I mean, he still is trying to create, because he still doesn't have faith. Though he loves Thakur, but he still feels that love and all these things are figures of speech. Then Narendra gets upset when he hears, he gets angry on him. What can you understand? You belong to the servant class. Now, what he meant was that a servant can't understand love. A child can understand love. If you have an attitude of child with God, then you know what love is. But a servant does not love his master. He just works for him. So Swamiji is angry with him. He says, you, what a mean-minded person you are. You are behaving as if you are belonging to the servant class. All of you will serve me and massage my feet. Even Sharat, Mitir and Desho. So he's in a jocular way saying, what do you understand? What love is? What Thakur did for me? How much deeply he loved me? You people, because you understand only the gross, if because you understand only the gross, you belong to the servant class, always seeking a favor from the master, serving him but not loving him, or not serving out of love, serving like a slave. So you are only fit for doing service like massaging my feet. So he is just trying to tell him in a very jocular way that you people, by saying this, by telling that there is no love in the world, when I myself have experienced this love from my Guru, my uh, Thakur. So Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa gave that love. So Swamiji is experiencing that. And then he uh, tells his brother disciple, don't flatter yourself that you have understood everything. Just by making a casual statement that there is no love in this universe. Who has told you? God is there. We can love God, God can love us. That is the eternal love. Then he says, then he just jokes. And then the brother disciple says, no, 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 I will not say, he admits that he has made a mistake. So he says, don't flatter yourself that you have understood everything. Don't make such statements that there is no love in the universe. So we will conclude this. And M is now, I'll just end with M's attitude, I mean M's thought, when he hears Narendra speaking such bold words and such words of conviction that there is love in this universe. So M says to himself, Sri Ramakrishna has infused a lot of metal in the many of the brothers of the monastery, not only in Narendra. There are some others also, like Shashi Maharaj, who loved Thakur so deeply. Without such metal, is it possible to renounce lust and greed? That is Kamini Kanchan. Only if you have that kind of strength and conviction in the power of the Spirit, in the power of the love of the Lord, then you can give up all these things as trivial things, as transient things. So he is concluding. So we'll conclude. Then the next topic is spiritual practices of the monastic brothers. So we'll continue in the next class. So I've already taken a lot of time. If there is a question, one or two questions, we can just take. Yeah, I'm just looking at the chat. Oh my God. There are many questions. Let me see how many I can answer now. But I'll try to answer some questions, and there are some very big questions also. So, uh, let me go to the first question. The short ones, there are some very big questions. Uh, yes, the first is, uh, yes, uh, the first question is that lady was a prostitute, so it was not his wife. Perhaps he was living with her. That is true. That Rabindra's, that lady who betrayed him, was maybe by profession a prostitute, but somehow he was infatuated and he thought he could marry. So it was not his wife. That is true. Because nothing is very clearly written here. But since they say he has come from home, that she has driven him out, we assume that perhaps he wanted to marry her or whatever it is. But anyway, that is not important. What is important is the conversation that took place afterwards. So that whatever it may be, and M also has no clear idea, because these private things, people, there are so many rumors and all those things. But definitely, M had some information what was wrong with this Rabindra. Anyway, that is how gospel describes it. In M has described it, that she was a prostitute and he was trying to live with her. Now, there is another question. Why did M have so many pseudonames? Why did he not use his full name? You see, the idea is very clearly, Swamiji has mentioned that he praised M for hiding himself. If when we write reminiscences of anybody, of any saint or anything, we put that I becomes very prominent. In our reminiscences, I got this from my guru, I got this, I got that. We have a pride. That pride is good. That, as Swamiji says, Thakur loved me. It was a pride. It was a sattvic pride. It was not a rajasic or tamasic pride. But normally, when you write reminiscences, the I becomes more prominent. You have a tendency to show that I got this, others have not got it. So, if he always writes his whole name, then he writes as M only, then people know that the whole book is full of M and M and M. Though he has tried his best to uh, uh, note the questions asked by others, there are many times he himself is asking a question. But he knew that the person who asked the question is not important, the question is important. So he felt that in some conversations he had asked many questions. So he did not want people to feel that. So just he gave pseudonym, Mani, M. Then there were some other names also. A devotee. Sometimes he used to just say devotee. to not because he didn't want to disclose his name or identity, but he didn't want that people should think that he is important. He just wanted that I am a humble person, I'm just recording. You all focus on Thakur and the questions and the answers. Don't focus on the minor details, what has happened. The main essential message is very important. So that is why he has changed his name now and then. Now, uh, and how does one know if he or she is ready to renounce gross material life? Now, this is a question which has to be answered by one, and to what extent. It is not that everybody has to give up the material life. It is that we should give less importance to the gross. The idea of Vairagya is very simple. It is very, very, very simple. There's nothing mysterious or nothing so difficult about Vairagya. It is just a matter of common sense. The common sense says us, and you have to use common sense when there is no particular stage when one is ready to renounce. Of course, in Rabindra's case, Thakur could see, but it is very difficult for ordinary people to tell when the other person can renounce. You can tell for yourself, because we can know in the heart of our hearts what is good for us, or maybe our guru or somebody whom we trust can tell us. But you can't publicly ask somebody and take up. We have to experience that ourselves. So the idea is, when can one renounce the gross material life? One cannot fully renounce, but one can renounce the attachment one has, or the importance that one gives to gross material life. There's no stage in life where you can't give up the gross food, you can't give up the gross living. There are certain basic things which are necessary for survival, and there's nothing wrong in that. Even Thakur had a mosquito curtain, he had a bed, he had food, he had his own. Though he lived a very simple life, he was not infatuated with the worldly things. He gave it only the importance it deserved. So that is the idea. So that stage can come anytime, because if it is very clear to us that the temporary things are not worth going after, and that which is permanent, which will always be with us, whether we live or die, those things are permanent, of a more permanent nature. So if a thing is subtle, we go after it. If it is more subtle, if it goes to the causal level, and if it's a pure spirit, it is permanent. Once we have a touch of that spirit, then nobody can take it away from us. That's why they say the japa that you do, the spiritual practices that we do, they follow us beyond the grave, because there's nothing gross in it. Only the gross is taken away from us. So it's not necessary to be renounce the gross. It will automatically fall away from us when we give importance to the subtle. The gross is there to drag us, the avidya maya is there to drag us and make us feel that this temporary is permanent, of a permanent nature. It always, when we take the wrong advice, as Swami Vivekananda said here, if you take that wrong advice, you think the money or the woman, as Ravindra thought that that woman will make him happy. So he was going after somebody which was gross, or something which was gross, thinking that that lady would make him happy. But he was disillusioned because she herself threw him out. And then he realized that this gross thing known as woman, I will no more do it. Then he also renounced and then wanted to stay. Of course, he could not stay in the monastery, but at least for some time he decided to renounce. So that stage has to come. It can come like Buddha. It came in a very natural way. He had a divine vision. It can come in that way also. So we do not know when and where we will get that inspiration to reduce our dependence slowly on the gross. It's not that you have to just give it up from tomorrow. From tomorrow, I have nothing to do with the gross. That normally doesn't happen unless people are like Buddha and all the great saints who renounced. Tulsidas, he was so attached to his wife that he could not live even for one day without her. So when she went to her father's house, he followed her. He swam on the top of a dead body, a corpse which was floating on the Ganga, thinking that it is a log of wood. And with all the smell, he managed to reach the other shore. He was so infatuated with this temporary, and that lady herself became a cause for his vairagya and his renunciation. She admonished him, "Can't you stay without me for even for a day? You have come, you know what risk you have taken. You would have been drowned. And why, if this kind of attachment you had for God, if you had for God, you would have got immortal joy. Why are you running after me like this?" So that opened his eyes. So in Tulsidasa's case, it was almost instantaneous. The person who was so worldly, all of a sudden, because of some words uttered by his wife, he simply gets vairagya and leaves her and becomes Saint Tulsidas. So we can't say when one is ready. One may be ready, but something, some avidyamaya is obstructing that. So it is a very difficult question to answer, and there's no time, and there's no, I mean, things can uh, happen very slowly, things can happen fast, and then there is no uh, definite timeline for this, nor there is any particular point in life when these things come as a result of samskaras of several lives. It's not something we achieve so quickly. That's why whenever the desire to live a simple and uncomplicated life comes to us, we should know that some preparation has been made by us in our previous life. Some great soul has helped us, has been helping us in many ways. Maybe we were in touch with some of the great saints. So some circumstances have changed, but still our old memories, smritis come back, and we do that. Now there is a very big question. I will just read that question, and maybe, if possible, I'll answer. Swamiji, isn't it difficult, if not impossible, for a family man or a typical household to realize Brahman or Atman or God? Sri Ramakrishna mentioned a few times that through centuries the world has produced only one Janak who realized the truth. Janaka was a Raja. As a householder, Janak seems to be the only person in history who realized Brahman. No, he is not the only person. He is one of the few. That is true. Is he not an exception than a rule, rather than a rule? There was talk about Narendranath getting married, and Sri Ramakrishna became deeply worried. He went straight to the Kali temple and caught Mother Kali's legs and said, "Mother, please, please do not drown Naren." However, Sri Ramakrishna accepted Rakhal as his spiritual son, even though Rakhal was married. For married people, the chances of realizing God seems to be very slim. So the question is very difficult to answer, in the sense, it is true that Swami Vivekananda was supposed to be his chief disciple, though Rakhal Maharaj also. But for an incarnation, it is he, in spite of Yogananda, Shivananda was married, his wife died, he was a widower, he became a monk. Advaitananda was also married. In those days, it was very common to marry at a very young age. Though Shivananda Tarak married, he never had any contact with his wife, and she died, and he had become a widower, and then he was attracted to spiritual life. So even Swami Brahmananda had a very brief interaction. Yogananda, of course, married only because of certain compulsions. And Thakur's grace, Thakur said, doesn't marry, doesn't matter if you marry. I can take away your avidya maya. I will eat away your avidya maya. So there are many cases. Tulsidas was married. Tulsidas was married. There were so many married people who became saints later on. Mirabai was married. So there's no rule that only Janaka. Brahma Jnana, that Thakur says, only because to lead the path of jnana, the path of bhakti is a more natural path towards Brahman. Where the path of jnana, you are supposed to renounce the world first, think that the world is unreal. That happened only in the case of Janaka. But on the path of bhakti, a lot of householders, you see Tukaram had a wife, Narsim Mehta had a wife. They were all worldly people, but somehow their love for God, the grace of God dawned upon them. And but one thing is common, even if they were married, they were not worldly. There is a huge difference. Thakur himself married to show to the world that an ideal sannyasin can also, but he was an incarnation. It was possible for him to do that. But he did not encourage that with his younger disciples. But some of them who inadvertently or for some reason had married, they somehow by his grace managed to escape by some good chance. They managed to escape the bondage. It is not the marriage or non-marriage that really matters. It is the bondage that matters. If you think, or if one thinks that one will be bound more by marriage, then definitely one should not marry. There is a conversation in the gospel. I'll conclude with this. There was a conversation in the gospel. There is a conversation where a householder is there, and Swami Thakur was telling something to the would-be sannyasin disciples. That is why he was very particular not to tell them, so that their idea should not be diluted. So he used to call them separately. But sometimes he used to be very frank and openly tell. So some householders were sitting, and he was telling uh, Shashi Maharaj and the would-be Swami Ramakrishnananda and Sharat Maharaj. Both of them were not married. He was telling them about the pitfalls of married life, because he knew that these two would be one of the main disciples of the for future Ramakrishna movement. So he was telling this when one householder devotee was sitting there. Then, seeing this young men being told by Sri Ramakrishna not to marry, he said, if marriage was not preordained by God, why did God create? How will creation go on? So that was the question. So I have answered this question in the previous class. If you know, a similar question was asked. Then Thakur very quietly but very firmly told that person, you don't have to bother about the how if people don't marry, the creation will stop. That problem will never arise. There will be enough people to overpopulate the earth. In fact, the problem now is overpopulation. So Sri Ramakrishna jokingly said, you don't worry, God will take care of that. You don't have to bother that there will be the creation will stop. It will never happen, because there will always be more worldly people. But that doesn't mean that marrying or being in the household uh, should inspire a person to lead a worldly life. Bondage to the world is something different, and living an unmarried life is something different. So, in that sense, it is not impossible if one has the vairagya. That is the idea. Of course, to get jnana, people like Janaka are very, very rare, because Janaka was a king and at the same time he was a jnani. But others can become bhaktas. The path of bhakti is more gradual. It does not insist, as Raj Yoga insists on purity. Bhakti says, okay, I will reach the goal, but I will reach slowly. If somebody, Thakur used to give that example, Sri Ramakrishna, if one wants to go, one can go by a train, or can go by a bullock cart, or can even go by walking. So if some people prefer to go by walk, let them go. But there are people who want to travel there fast, who don't want to suffer, don't want to be born again and again. So no, if God's grace is there, that is the final word which Sri Ramakrishna said. Everybody, whatever be the stage of life, even a dacoit like Valmiki, who Ratnakara, he was Ratnakara before he became Valmiki, can become a saint like Valmiki. So there's no necessity, but as you said, as Sri Ramakrishna told Shashi Maharaj and uh, who became Ramakrishnananda, and Sharat Maharaj who became Sharadananda, he said, I am telling these boys what I feel is the truth. What I know is the truth. Whatever you want, you take from this. I'm not asking you to follow it. The person who was talking about what will happen if people don't marry, he said, you marry. Did I tell you not to marry? If you want, you marry and you experience that life. But that doesn't mean I should not tell these people, these young boys who are here. So they said, you take only, there is a proverb in Bengali that if you can't eat the whole fish, you cut the tail and cut the head and take the middle portion if you can't eat the whole thing. So many very often only the central portion is taken. So he tells him, if you don't can't digest the whole fish, don't take my full advice. You don't have to give up the world. Stay in the world because your desires are there. Finish it, and when you are done with it, when a stage may come when you will feel like giving up the world. So I take your leave. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.